Okay. Hi, Rich. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I see your books in the background. Solution Driven Destiny. Is this your first book, or have you written other books before?
It's actually my second book. My first book was a book of poems that I wrote actually while I was sitting in a deer stand, and so that was my first book, book of hunting poems. It's called Tales from the Blind.
Okay. Well, that sounds interesting. So, just a deer stand is what? That's where you sit in sort of camouflage, waiting for the deer to come.
That's right.
Okay. And I've never gone hunting, so I don't know what all the terminology is, but all right. So, according to your bio, you work in the oil and gas industry in Texas. Is that correct? How is the industry? Because I know the government is Biden has seemingly wanting to kill the oil and gas industry. I don't know. Have you experienced any issues with your job at this point?
It's been a challenge for really for about the last 15 months. It's been a challenge. A lot of projects have been put on hold. And it seems to be coming back. To be honest, it seems like things are starting to turn back on. Some of the projects that were held up are starting to come back. So that's a good thing. Uh, Work is starting to pick back up, and I think the travel. People are getting back on airplanes, and people are going on vacation again, and so that makes a big difference too. The amount of fuel that's being burned.
I think there was a combination effect there between the government's change of policy regarding oil and gas and COVID that probably put a crimp on the industry. But you're right, things are starting to ease up again, and hopefully we can get back to somewhat of a normal situation in this country.
Yes,
I know I'm sick to death of COVID. I want it to go away and just be done with it.
absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about your book. Your book is called Solution Driven Destiny. Why don't you just tell us basically what it's about?
Well, in a nutshell, it's a lot of times we think that the difficult parts of life are when we enter into those, it seems like we just want to get out of them, and then a lot of times God puts us in situations so that we can provide a solution in that situation. The Bible's full of stories where people walked into difficult situations and they were there for a specific purpose, and that's true for us too. So sometimes, the our destiny is found in being the solution in the troubled times that we walk through in this life. It's not like we have to finally get over all the hurdles in life before we finally find our destiny. Sometimes we find our destiny right in the middle of those difficult situations.
How do you know when you found it?
Well, that's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with the passions that we I think we know deep down inside what it is that drives us, or what we have a passion for. Um, those things that are in our heart that we're really passionate about. Uh, I think that we know deep inside when we found those things that God has created us for. We sense that it's something that we really have a passion for and drive. And it's the thing you've heard the saying. What would you do every day even if you couldn't get paid for it? So that thing, that when we finally step into, really it's the anointing of God working in and through us, and it's not just so much a strain on us.
Well, I had a woman on the show several weeks ago who was, it was a funny story because she said to me she thought she was happy. She had a nice family. She had two children, a husband, a good job. Everything was going along fine. And then they had this tragic situation happen in the family. I won't get into the details, but it completely changed their life around. And she ended up on a completely different path and was 10 times happier than she thought she ever could be. So that's the reason I asked you, how do you know when you found it? Because as far as she was concerned, before the tragedy happened, she had already found it. But in fact, she really hadn't.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, some of the things that I talk about in the book is that when we feel like we're somewhere which is right where we're supposed to be. Uh, it seems like everything is worked out. Like the story you're telling there, I've had those situations happen in my life where I thought I was right where I was supposed to be. I was happy. I'd just received some kind of promotion or maybe, move into a new house or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden all of that comes to an end and it's like, oh, wow, my whole life has come to an end because this is where I thought I was supposed to be. And then it turns out that, I end up somewhere else and I'm happier than I was, or I have a better home than I used to have. So, and that's some of the things that I talk about in the book is that, we don't really know what is over the next mountaintop. We get to the top of the mountain, whether it's whatever it is that we're going towards, whether it's something in our career or family or whatever it may be. And, we get to a place and we think that we should just stay there. And a lot of times that's not the case. Sometimes we have to go back down the other side of the mountain in order to go up another mountain. And in those times of going down and through the valley are difficult times in our lives, but there are times that are necessary to get to the next place that we may need to get to, just like the example that you were telling there. She would have been just as happy to stay at that high point in her life. And, but lo and behold, life takes us through a valley and, we have to go through that valley to get to the next place. And turns out it's a higher point in our life or, a higher point in the mountain range of life, as it turns out.
Well, how much of this is under our control? Because I would argue that not a lot of it is. I think we're doing what we think we're supposed to be doing, what's giving us some kind of security in life. A lot of people do work at jobs that they're not particularly passionate about, but they do it because they have to, because they need the money, they need the paycheck. But a lot of our life seems to be sort of out of our control, out of our hands. How do we know, what we can control and what we can't control in our life?
That's a good question. For starters, some things are in our control and some things aren't. Our choices are within our control. Obviously, the choices of other people are not within our control, and sometimes that has an impact on the direction of our life. And then there's the fact that we live in a fallen world that we have resistance that's constantly coming against our lives from that fallen world. There's an enemy, the devil, who is opposing us, and so we have that going on. And then there's also God is also working things together for us as we're work in obedience to Him, as we live our lives towards Him, as we continue to turn towards Him and pursue Him. Then He's the Bible teaches that He's constantly working things together for our good. So even those things that don't seem like they're the way they should be, He's actually working them into the mix of the final outcome in our life. And the thing about that is, God isn't always controlling what's going on. So we do have choices. We can decide, and we have a free will. God created us with a free will, and we can make choices. But also, God is all knowing. So even though He may not control everything all the time, He does know the choices that we're going to make ahead of time. So it may not seem like we can control it very much because, the outcome, God already knows what the outcome is going to be. But in fact, we can control where we end up in life because of our choices. So it's possible that we never choose Him, and that we never choose our destiny, and that we never choose to go down the paths that He would like us to go down. And He knows that. He knows, ahead of time where we'll choose to end up. But it's up to us to continue to turn to Him, in times of difficulty, and He'll continue to work those things, for our good.
Was there any particular situation or thing that happened to you that inspired you to write the book? Or what was it that inspired you to write the book?
It was a series of things, and one of the things that really brought it together for me was I had a business that we went out of business, and we had a customer that didn't pay us, and it drove us out of business over a period of several months. And in that, you know, leading up to that, God brought me through several stories in the Bible, several Bible characters, and I had actually preached a few sermons about those things. And you know what they say is that the person that learns the most is the one that's doing the teaching or preaching. So as I went through those, and God was speaking to me out of those stories, and I was writing those things down and taking those notes. And when it finally come time that this was going on in my business, God had really prepared me to go through that, but I didn't really know it at the time. I didn't realize that that was the case. But after the fact, I could look back and see that God was getting me ready for what was about to go on in my life. And really what went on is, it was a financial crash for both the business and for me personally, and which was a traumatic event for me and for my family. And so when that happened, all of these things kind of, life kind of comes to a halt, and I could see how people could get into a situation where they just didn't think tomorrow was going to happen. It looked so bad in the valley that I didn't ever think there would be another mountaintop. I didn't know how I could get past this situation in my life. I didn't know, where I would go from here. It just seemed like that life had come to a halt, and I didn't know what tomorrow was really going to look like. And in that moment, I remembered that, God had gotten us through other things. My wife reminded me really at the time that, God has gotten us through other things, and He'll get us through this too. And so as I just began to lean on Him and remember the things that He had walked me through, and continue to press into Him, He continued to bring these things back up and talk to me about, the stories in the Bible where people had went through terrible times for years, sometimes, like such as the story of Joseph. Here he was supposed to be the number 2 guy in Egypt, and he had to go through 15 years of being falsely accused and being put in prison, sold into slavery. Not really what you think is going to be the prelude to being the number 2 guy in a country, but that was part of the setup. And so I began to see God at work in my life in one of the worst things that I've been through in my lifetime, and see that what He'd really called me to do is to walk through that season and be a solution in that season, be a help to other people that I was getting to meet only because of the situation that I was going through. And really, He led me to a better place. I love where I work at now. I love the place that I'm at in life, and I wouldn't have gotten here had it not been for the things that happened in my life. So that was really what brought about writing the book, was just kind of the bringing together of how God got me through that, so that I could tell other people that, look, even when you hit the wall, everybody hits the wall eventually. Even when you get to that place in life that you don't think that there's a future, there's a future. There's another side of the story.
I think that if anything comes out of adversity, if you gain self-confidence, I think that's a big plus for a lot of people, because sometimes, let's face it, in the United States, we have a pretty good life. As Americans, we have one of the highest standards of living on the planet. And sometimes I think we can get a bit lazy and a bit complacent, thinking that everything is good and everything is fine. And then when something happens, people don't know how to react to it. But if they get out of it and they look back on it years later, it was a building block. It was something that helped them and created a stronger sense of values, a stronger personal integrity. The takeaway from it was good, even though the situation was bad.
I think that's absolutely true. Yeah, I see in people's lives, I know for me personally, what I would have wanted was just to get out of the situation immediately. The best thing for me would have been that, we got paid and the business went on and continued, and today I would still own my own business. And I'm finding out now that it was really better for me that all that changed. And I'm glad I'm where I'm at now. So, going through that process, I learned so many things. I mean, when you're in that type of a situation, when you're in a traumatic situation, when you're in really kind of firefighting mode in your life, you learn things faster than, you don't have time to go to
Exactly.
college
Yeah.
or anything like that to figure out what you're going to do, what your next move is. You just have to start making moves and start trying to work through the process of cleaning up your situation, trying to get your head back above water. And in the process of that, you can learn a lot in a short period of time. So it was really a benefit to me, and I see that happen in the lives of other people too. That what they go through teaches them so much that they never would have learned any other way. They would have never, like you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
We get lazy. Everything's handed to us, and when something bad happens, we just want to get out of it, just like that. And the reality is, if we'll stick with it, we can learn some things in those difficult times.
Right. And then when the next one comes along, you think, I handled the last one. So it brings you self-confidence. You know you can get through the next one probably
That's right.
easier than you got through the first one. Rich, we do have to wrap this up. We are out of time. Do you have a website that you want to give out, personal website or a website for your book?
I do. I do have a personal website, and my book is on one of those pages. It's richwmiller.com, RICHWMILLER.com. And my book is also available on Amazon.com.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. It was nice meeting you. Best of luck with everything.